All right, guys, welcome back. Tonight's guest joining us on the stage.
Sorry, Mike, my bad. It's that camera up there for this shot, the one that sits up a little higher.
Oh, on the side of the...
Yeah, just look at this guy right here.
Okay, gotcha.
At the corner of the booth.
Gotcha.
That way it's down the barrel.
Gotcha.
And don't worry about it after that. You can look dead ahead.
Okay.
Good? Yep.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Tonight's guest is none other than Dwayne Sliger. Welcome back, Dwayne. It's always good to have you and conversation. And before we jump in, like always, we just got to get the whole name thing out of the way. You're married to Morningstar royalty, right?
That is correct, Miss Laura Sliger.
Miss Laura Sliger, children's minister extraordinaire, and she's been killing it on these children's videos with during this pandemic, the stay at home. So you might have a little actress on your hands right now.
I do. She's really fun. Usually she walks in my shadow because of my height, but I think it's all been turned around during this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's been amazing. She's been amazing. Hey, let's talk a little bit about you before we get to the questions. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey and what got you to the mental health field.
Yeah, very good. So, born and raised in Tennessee, eventually made my way to St. Louis and went to seminary at Concordia Seminary. From there, served in a couple of parishes and eventually made my way into the Navy. That was my dream, to be a chaplain in the Navy. So had the opportunity to do that about 8 years. Deployed to Iraq for 2007, 2008, came off active duty, and then made my way working in the mental health field. I mean, mostly chaplains in the military do a lot of mental health services, so that was some of my training as well, and eventually moved toward licensure, and here I am with my own private practice.
Wow, great. We've been talking the last few weeks about things like grief and depression and suicide and people spending a lot of time on their screens and not connecting with their friends and their family. Tonight's subject could certainly be connected to any and all of those, but it also has some unique aspects. What fears or other security issues do you tend to see across the board people struggling with just at all times?
I would say clinically, a lot of the fears that I get presented with in sessions, making a distinction between a phobia, which is an irrational fear, or anxiety, which is something that we've somewhat created in our mind, okay? I think a fear of snakes to me is a real thing.
Me too, brother.
Me too, totally a real thing. But when does it become irrational? When does it cross that line? I would say for the most part, people present with a wide variety of things. For example, a fear of death, a fear of changing careers, a fear of relationships, fear of failure, fear of even success.
That's an interesting one, right? I've heard people talk about the fear of success, and it's like, well, everybody wants to succeed, right? Unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to go with one's image of self. And when we think about security is also aligned with resources. And we've got different resources. We've got physical resources, emotional resources, spiritual resources, and mental resources. But some of us are resource deficient. So as you achieve certain levels in life of success and you're promoted and people expect things out of you, there becomes a fear, am I going to be resource deficient? Am I going to have what it takes? Or will I finally be exposed to be an imposter? That's where we get into what's called the Imposter Syndrome. Man, I just don't really, if people really knew me,
right.
do I have this much capital to be doing what I'm doing right now?
Wow.
I think part of that can actually create some humility. That's important.
It's a good side.
It's a good side. On the other hand, I think it can hold people back from realizing their potential in life, and they miss out on a lot of opportunities because of their own negative self-talk or negative self-image.
Big part of security and insecurity, right? This global pandemic, plus the economic crisis, and now the racial tensions, just layer after layer after layer. How has that affected people's grappling with their own security/insecurity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've spent a lot of time talking with folks over the past 3 months about the pandemic, you know, foremost on their mind. And I saw a trend in some folks. You know, when it first began, there was this like deer in the headlight look. What are we going to do with this? Good question. Media was giving us information, sometimes a little bit too much information, you know, on this as well. And then I saw people transition a little bit to begin to take a little more risk, to be a little freer, to understand that there is life beyond COVID. Unfortunately, some folks stay stuck, for example, and may resort to hoarding resources. Again, resources are important when it comes to security.
Yeah.
Do I have enough toilet paper? Do I have enough Clorox? Do I have enough groceries? Fortunately, in our country, we have a lot of everything. That's the physical side. But inside, a lot of this insecurity that comes from that could just be due to their lack of emotional connection. And it gets projected into other areas of their life.
So I don't have healthy relationships, good connections with people at work or family strain, and so it shows up, it manifests itself in, you know, I got to go out and buy 78 packages of toilet paper.
I got to find security where I can find it.
Got to find
So
security.
I see and I say, great, I have enough here, but how much is really enough? And then we, again, start that cycle of self-talk all over again. I think also, too, in our society, you know, our families aren't as close as they used to be. People move, we're mobile, and having that family support is pretty key. I mean, your family, love them or hate them, they're your family.
Right.
And to be completely cut off from your family is not necessarily a healthy thing. We've
Right.
got to find ways to adjust as we grow.
That's one of the things that we try to offer here in church is community. You know, we're called the family of God, right? The new family of Jesus. And so people coming in and not just attending a worship service with hundreds of other people, but getting in groups where they can know and be known to form those relationships helps them not only just grow in their relationship with God, but also, you know, have a stronger sense of identity and self, and that bleeds over into better security.
Absolutely, it does. We need that sort of balance in our life and conversation. I mean, you imagine that 30-second or 1-minute interval that we used to have in worship, right, where we greeted each other, said hello, shared the peace. I actually looked forward to that. Just connecting with someone just for a second or two. How you doing today?
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, I do too. The old meet and greet time, as we call it here. We see that now on the video before our worship services, and it just feels like a million years ago when people are like walking toward one another to hug, and you're like, no, don't do it. Crazy stuff what this has done. Hey, we talked a little bit about the connection between lack of security and being insecure. Some similarities there, but also some differences. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, again, when you think about it, I'd like to boil it down to one thing, and it's called boundaries. Putting in place who we are and who we're not is really huge. And actually, there's a great theory about this called attachment theory. And maybe folks can Google that and read more about it, but it actually sprang out of World War II and looking at orphans and refugees. We know that primarily our security starts in our family of origin. It starts with how we attach with our parents because primarily they're our first caregivers. Psychologically, biologically, we're made to attach to our parents. And so how they respond to us through the cueing, and again, I just want to make a disclaimer, there are no perfect parents. Okay, sometimes we're just good enough parents. You know, so I don't want to turn this into, oh, you really messed your kid up because when he dropped something, you didn't go pick it up. I don't want to turn it into that. But a lot of that has to do how we're cueing into the verbal cueings of our kids and how we're developing that in them. Whether they are going to be explorers in the world or whether they're going to shut themselves off from the world has a lot to do with how we're interacting with them.
Wow. Yeah, and so that has a lifelong impact. You know, those first few years, they say that so much of a child's imprinting is you know, for the rest of their life is done by age, what?
3. Even 3, you know, you're looking at early at 3 because that's the period of growth and development where children start to engage the environment more. You know, you can remember as we raised, you know, our children, they'll walk a little bit and turn around and see if you're watching. They're exploring and they want to know, is this safe or not? Can I keep doing this?
Right.
That's a really huge part. And children at a pre-verbal level are processing a lot of information. Now, I don't want to blame parents. I think that's where this gets misconstrued.
Right.
All you therapists want to do is blame parents. Well, there might be some out there. I'm not one. I think we have to become responsible and make our own choices later in life. You know, we do.
I just think information, awareness creates opportunity. You can do with it what you want to.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we all, when we have access to information, then we can choose whether we're gonna take it in, we're gonna learn and grow, or just shun it. So I think we need folks like you to kind of help us get out of our own way, if you will.
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes I know I can be my own worst enemy and start making up stories in my own mind about what's real and what's not. Hey, let's look at this. We got this slide. You talked about just some fundamental needs of security, and this is our old friend Abraham Maslow, right?
Oh, yeah. Good old
I bet you got
Maslow
this
here.
poster in your office, right?
I got it in a file somewhere. I probably have some handouts that I give people. Yeah, you know, that's an interesting thing. You know, Maslow looked at this, believe it or not, in like 1942. Now, what was going on in 42? You know, World War II. But he based it on studying significant people like Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, you know, and say, what does it make someone to be actualized? And so for Maslow, he really didn't make it like a pyramid per se. I mean, that's how it appears. And one thing we've got to clear up, this is not like a video game where you get one level and you get to go to the next. You get rewarded, you know, and finally you kill the beast at the end and you're, you know, reign supreme. That's not what that's about. But it's more like a journey in life. So if you start at the bottom, these are just basic physiological needs that we need to stay alive, needs and wants, right? But then safety, security, like a family, or some people join gangs or join things that give them that sense of identity as they move up. The self-actualization piece is really important because what that means is that I am living the life I was meant to live. I'm in my flow. I'm living out my calling. I'm living my true self. He actually had one more step to that later in life called transcendence. You sort of move beyond a point of good or bad and more of a virtuous life. And that's a different stage.
Yeah, that's how does that connect then to the spiritual? How do you see, you know, our physical needs as we move up to that self-actualization? You talked about the connection to our calling, our purpose, our true self. How does that connect to the spiritual life?
I think it connects first and foremost by realizing that on one level, you know, man doesn't live by bread alone. You know, and we can have all of these needs, but we also need people in our life to coach us and encourage us and to celebrate our life journey with us. I think that's the dynamic of the spiritual life. I mean, if God is for us, who or what can be against us?
Right.
And if you think about God as we understand God as a being that knows all things, I think I've got to be quiet in that presence.
Yeah. We tend to talk a whole lot, right?
I don't have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I just want to be quiet and listen and be present. So I think that's initially how it ties into that our true self is that self that we've kept hidden from the world because at one time we may have tried to expose it and we were told, you shouldn't think that way or you shouldn't believe this way. Eventually we get to the point where we say, no, this is my beliefs, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is who I am meant to be.
And once we understand our identity of who God really has created us to be, then that affects how we engage in the rest of the world, and we stop looking to other things for security, toilet paper, retirement
Exactly.
funds, those kind of things, right?
I think this is why it's still important to keep this in mind, is that if you look, some of the security things are about property, but as we move up, I take security more in who I am and how I can contribute.
Interesting. When let me ask you this: how do we know the difference between, hey, this is something like the snake that's real, or when a fear becomes irrational, or do we have that ability? Do I if I'm thinking irrationally, can I actually know that? Or do I need somebody else to kind of, in my life, the importance of relationship and community, do I need somebody to tell me that I'm thinking irrationally?
Yes. I think sometimes we do need another person to speak into our life, to speak the truth to us from an objective standard as well. To me, the key sign that I notice in people is that there's a normal range of anxiety that we experience in life. Test anxiety, performance anxiety. Part of that is really good because it helps us keep focused. You know, I always still want to have a little butterfly in my stomach.
Yeah.
It keeps me focused.
Yep,
It keeps
me
me
too.
on task. I don't want to get like, I'm all that and have it figured out. You might just have the rug pulled out from under you. The irrational nature is when it becomes obsessive and it begins to get in the way of your quality of life. Where, for example, you no longer venture out anymore. You no longer want to have relationships. The problem is that when we become our own advisor, now imagine if we're our own advisor and we have these irrational thoughts swarming around, what are we advising ourselves with?
Right, irrational thoughts.
Irrational thoughts, and one irrational thought leads to another irrational thought. I think partnering with someone, whether it's a therapist, a pastor, a trusted friend, that you allow to speak truth into your life, and that's part of it. You have to allow that to happen, and I guess that's part of security.
Yeah.
I want to be influenced by you. It's really a huge deal. I think we can challenge those thoughts to a certain level and do some cognitive techniques with them to help them probably get to the root of it. Because really, we're problem-solving people. We're meant to solve problems, and if we allow our amygdala to get hijacked, we're not more in the center of focusing on goals. We're just reacting.
The amygdala hijack, that's like 3 steps above my
Yeah,
pay grade
that's
there.
called we'll just call it the lizard brain. Okay, so it's like the difference between, do you want to be a lizard or a wizard?
Huh?
You know, it's sort of like Gandalf.
Right.
You shall not pass.
The gatekeeper.
The
kinda.
gatekeeper,
Yeah, yeah.
and we've got to understand that, as we say, your brain is busy and it wants things to do, so we got to give it a task to do. So we can sit here, and there are healthy distractions. Not all distractions are negative.
Right.
There are healthy distractions,
Right.
and we need to find those that help fulfill us.
Yeah, and we can feed our faith, we can feed our fear, and whatever we put our mind to and feed, it's just going to grow. It can be
Absolutely.
irrational or irrational.
Absolutely.
What about when we think about kids? And I know you've had some professionally, you and the folks in your practice do some stuff with teenagers and with parents. What do parents need to know when it comes to, fears and phobias, what's normal, maybe going a little too far? What are some things that parents need to pay attention to these days?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I deal primarily with adolescents, usually about 15 and above. That tends to be the age group I like to work with. One of the things I've noticed is sometimes parents overparent. They do just a little too much. And I can understand we want our kids to be successful. We want them to have all of these wonderful needs here as well. But one thing with parents, I like to interview the parents before I meet with the kid. I like to sort of ask them some questions because in many cases, sometimes the kid can be the symptom bearer of the family issue. That may be a surprise to some people, but symptoms have a way of landing. So I try to tell parents, look, are these your kids' fears or are they your fears?
Yeah.
What are you still living out from your own family that potentially you're projecting? So as I tell parents, let's look at this on a spectrum. You want to comfort your child, that's highly important, but you also want to challenge your child. So we've got to sort of gauge between comfort and challenge. It's huge. You want your child to be safe, but you also want them to be secure. You want them to be strong. We as parents have to know the right antidote sometimes at the right time.
Right.
And we have to allow them to take some risk.
Yeah.
Safe risk.
Yeah.
Safe risk. And let them fall sometimes. It's okay.
Yeah.
How else are we going to learn except from some pain?
Yeah. Got a puppy right now, and it's just give him a little more leash, and a little more leash, and a little more leash, because the goal of parenting is not to have your child necessarily living with you when, he or she is 30 or 40 because they can't cut the cord. They've never grown to learn to do life independent of
Absolutely.
mom and dad, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that it's interesting is you try to coach parents to say, it's amazing that your kid probably has a solution to this problem. If you can just bear with them enough, and you need to raise your tolerance for some pain in order to let your child kind of figure it out, because your child, he or she, is also a problem solver. And why don't you check in with them every now and then and see what they're solving?
Yeah, kind of that move from being a teacher when kids are young to a coach, and not telling so much, but asking more questions.
Yeah, in my family, choice theory was big. So what would you do? Like, oh, gee, I could better answer wisely.
That just sets our kids up for success. And I love that how our own fears and anxieties can get wrapped up and be transferred to our kids, and they can take on. So what we see our kids struggling with actually may be rooted in us. So parents, not only need to, it sounds like, be aware of things going on in their kids, but to get healthy themselves, right? To take a look in the mirror of what's going on with me, so that, when I get me right, then I have a better chance of my kids.
Yeah. One of the things that I do is I work with couples who are divorced or divorcing, and I get involved in a lot of co-parenting counseling. And you've got two households now, you have one or two children. And that is so important, of how you speak well and how you conduct yourself and how you sort of keep your anger in check, because it's about your kids. Actually, you're on your kids' team at that point.
Yeah, good.
And it's so important, yeah.
So couple final questions. I got to ask this. In terms of, everything that we have going on, just let's get real practical here for a couple minutes. We've got a lot of things that can challenge our security right now, our feelings of insecurity. We've got this COVID thing. Do I go out or I stay in? Is this rational or is this irrational? Is this news station right, or is this news overabundance of information? And then, you've got people who are wondering about their retirement funds, their investment portfolios. Are they going to be financially secure? Am I going to have a job, and how long? What all is happening? Is this racial tension going to escalate? Just layer after layer. Can you give us some, because even on a great day, we're all going to feel, to some level, at some point, some stress, some anxiety. Can you give us some tips when we're starting to get dialed up?
Yeah, very good. The first tip I would suggest, and it's so easy, it's actually down there at the bottom: breathe.
Breathe.
Take a breath. Breathe in and out. Practice some good box breathing. Breathe 4, 4, and 4. Our nervous system, we respond to stimuli in the environment. And in one sense, our brain, wants to keep us safe. Okay, I get that. But is that a snake, or is that just the wind blowing? I don't really know. So I've got to be able to make distinctions. Learn to breathe. Learn to calm that nervous system down. You've got a parasympathetic nervous system. Think of a parachute. Get into your wise mind. Remember the lizard versus the wizard. You get into your wise mind and ask yourself, at this moment, what is in my control and what is not? Now, I can't control the stock market, but I certainly can control what I do with my investments. I can have a trusted advisor who can help me navigate that, and I want that in my life. I certainly cannot control what's happening with COVID right now, but I control my response to the environment. I have to look and ask what is in my control and what's not, and that is a really good place to start. Once we breathe and self-soothe, we get flooded, so we've got to shut the floodgates, and get down to that level. I think that's the best thing we can do, and say, what problem am I dealing with right now? And I have to define my problem. That is so key, to find the problem. Otherwise, we don't know what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
And then I ask, is this a problem I can solve? If the answer is no, then we're done. If it's yes, then what are you willing to do about it, and what will you do about it? Again, we've moved ourselves more to a position of thinking and creating and solving, not just reacting.
Yeah, action instead of reaction.
Absolutely.
What's real instead of what's made up.
Absolutely. You know, when it comes to everything else that's going on, you know, how can I make a difference in my community with racial harmony? What am I doing in my community, in my time, and in my place? That's where I have to start. I find a lot of times that people get really global, we call it. They globalize everything, and sometimes to me, that's just a good excuse to not do much.
Yeah, I can see that. I have that feeling every now and then about issues being so big and what can I do? And oftentimes that's just an excuse for inaction. But with the flood of information out there, it just can seem so overwhelming. So some of those things that you shared with us of getting real and getting in the moment and getting grounded right here separates me from all that out there and helps me. I can do this now. Or I get to choose. I don't have to have any expectations from anybody else. Just what does God want me to do in this moment?
In this moment right now, make the most of make the most of your time, for the days are evil, Paul said. You know, that's a great way of make the most of this time right here. And I would say to folks, you know, news can be just another rush and addictive behavior. Cut it off. Take a break, limit the time that you watch it. There are a lot of experts on social media that aren't experts. Really what made them experts is that they created an account. So you're good at creating an account, but you just throw out information. And diversify what you read. Actually, I challenge folks, read things you disagree with. That's the way to broaden your mind. Actually, that's what Maslow was getting at, acceptance of facts. Open yourself up to that. And you might find yourself doing a little bit better. Man,
I tell you, he said some of the very things that I've been talking about in some of the sermons, but this is a smart guy, so you can actually, you know, maybe a few of those things actually were, but you said them a whole lot better.
Well,
better
actually,
than me.
It just means I've been listening to your sermons. I mean, so we're just giving feedback right now is all we're doing. It's a feedback loop.
Feedback loop. Hey, because we're here at church, let's talk about, because obviously faith has a huge, our relationship with God has a huge role in our entire well-being, mental, physical, relational, spiritual. In terms of our faith, how can that be positive in terms of coping with stress? How might it also be used in a negative way?
Yeah, good question. This is one of the things I really enjoy about my profession. I'm a therapist who is a Christian. And because of that, some folks come because you have the element of introducing your faith in the therapeutic setting. So to me, it's an important aspect, and I don't think we can do any better than start with who God is. And I think 1 John broke it down quite well. God is love. But love has expectations. I don't think it's just a ticket to do whatever. Love has expectations. So I say, people, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be loved by God? Because God loves you more than you know, and it's not going to change. Nothing you do can discount that, okay? And have you taken enough time to slow down to allow God to speak to you? Because remember, this being is all-knowing and all-powerful, so maybe we just need to have that time. The other thing, too, is, Jesus is a priest who sympathizes with our weaknesses. I think that's really huge to know. We have an advocate who understands our walk and where we are. Get involved with your church community. Lean on folks who have walked that trail before you and who are willing to walk it with you. That's where our greatest growth and development comes. Not many of us can be ascetics and move out to the desert. Some of us actually need this community to help us engage ourselves, and that true self begins to emerge.
That's great. Dwayne, incredible wisdom you've shared with us. Thanks so much for your time and your willingness to be present here. Would you thank Dwayne with me? Wherever you are, just put your hands together and Dwayne Sliger, everybody.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike.